doing part two here of spiritual blindness. Um, I guess I should probably have written out some notes, uh, made some lecture notes or something. Um, but I just do these as two things. Holy Spirit prompting, or realization, or frustration, or woundedness. That's where these come from. To help others. But now that we dealt with this of the spiritual blindness, no compassion. But it's deeper than that. We're not talking about bleeding heart. Oh, everybody should be a bleeding heart liberal. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is compassion. Compassion is the identification to the suffering of others, and the fact that you can feel it to a certain extent. Not everybody is an empath. An empath can directly understand and feel the pain of others. But if you have empathy, which means you're human, and you're not flawed in a way where you really need help, then you should at least be able to understand and to identify with the experience of another person, as opposed to sympathy, which is all the above, in addition to you take upon your shoulders the yoke of another. That's sympathy, which is not bad. Sometimes sympathy is required. Remember the story of the Good Samaritan. Sometimes sympathy is required. Remember the story of all the ruining of the thatched roof and all the trouble that was made when Jesus was talking inside of that house. They broke the guy's roof to put the paralyzed guy down in there. And the apostles were yelling and saying, "Hey, knock it off." And Jesus said, "Stop. Bring the men to me." That's sympathy. He took the yoke of that man and healed him. Both are required to be a good Christian. If you don't have one or the other, then you need to get help. You need to regain it back. People who've been through great trauma, or in prison. Prison has its own trauma, or they've been through the trauma of being a victim in one thing or another, or they've been in combat. I mean, lots of things will hit at empathy and sympathy, but the fact of the matter is you have to try to regain it back. It may be hard for some people, who are in law enforcement, or people who are, somebody in the military who, deals with firefighting a lot or is under fire, or people who, fly drones and stuff. There's different things, or people that work in corrections. Yeah, you have to work and earn an income for your family, but yet you don't want to be spiritually dead and become like that. So you have to find a way in the midst of your pain and your toil and your providing for your family to try to grasp these things even a little. Because the day's going to come, especially in some fields, when it's time to walk away. Sometimes you're injured, military, corrections, law enforcement, and then you have that little seed of your empathy and your sympathy there, then you can work on it. But when we're dealing with people, who don't have any empathy or sympathy there, they won't see right and wrong. They only see what's here. And many times they can't comprehend, the depth of an action or the depth of their actions. They can't comprehend the the effect on other people, because they only understand what their part. People with depression struggle with this. And that's why they need to be out and about more than other people. More than, not less than, or equal to. And no, we're not doing a math lesson here. More than. They have to always be engaging that human, the humanness, always re-engage it more than other people. That way their depression won't turn them into somebody like this. Because when people are like this does not help the kingdom of God at all. So when people are like that, they may make wrong choices that take somebody down the wrong road, or that lead somebody or themselves into sin, and they won't comprehend it. And some of them may be so stuck in a particular mode or a particular pattern, you know. Um, even as the Pharisees, they do their ablutions every day. They do their sacrifice. They do the morning. They do Musaf. They do all their sacrifices every day. But when they walk out, this is if they're a Pharisee who's a Levite, and they walk out, and or I guess anybody can sacrifice for their family. Actually, no, they can't. But anyway, at that time, they go through the same thing every day, and they don't change. They know all about the ritual. They know all about the Torah. They know all about the, beginnings of the Talmud at that time, but they don't change. Same thing. They can't think outside of their pattern. They don't grow. So, dealing with people like this, you may or not be able to reach them, but you have to try to plant a seed. You have to try. You can't just ignore how they are or get frustrated and blow up and walk away. You have to try. Force yourself. Sometimes it is difficult. You will walk away in tears, and they'll try to make it's not all about you. And you're not trying to say that, you're trying to say this is about right and wrong. This is about, future effects of our actions now, and you can't reach them. And try to see what this law or this manual says this, and they're like, well, I don't think so. I don't believe that. I've never seen it. Or show me, but you can't, because for one reason or another, especially if you're a victim of recurrent hacking, you may not be able to. And they will say, well, it's too difficult to find stuff, so I've never seen it. I don't have time to look. Again, they can't move outside the pattern, even if it's wrong. Or people will say, well, I don't have to report fraud. I didn't commit the fraud. You didn't commit the fraud. I don't have to report it, when they're mandated to report it because their position requires it. Or you say, well, what about the abuse of a child or an elder? I'm an elder. Okay, you want it that way? Yeah, we'll call CPS. Does that seem like a helpful tone? Yeah, so one thing that I've learned, I know that people, get pulled into stuff. All the groups that we've identified that are involved in targeting us, besides the individuals, which is very complex. Some people are friends with somebody who didn't like us. Other people saw something, on some QAnon website or in Facebook. It gets really complex. But as far as the groups, the mass groups, apparently some Hebrew Israelites don't like me. Some black Hebrew Israelites, I can't say they speak for the entire group, but a significant portion of them have targeted us. Some apostolics, not all apostolics, obviously, but a couple of apostolic churches have targeted us. And QAnon, that's the consistent thing. We've had fanatical QAnoners targeting us for almost 9 years. It started in the Philippines. That's where it started. Started trying to harass us, bully us, target me, post things about my youngest daughter's mother. That's when it started, QAnon. They have a lot of resources, and they don't like somebody like me who is against human trafficking in all its forms. I think even the movie industry, I don't think there's such thing as couples-oriented movies. Definitely dancing is exploitive. Video rooms, exploitive. It's all exploitive. That's all I can say. I'm a guy. I'm not perfect, obviously. But I know at this point in my life, it's all exploitive. It's wrong. Even, supporting, we can speak of the morality of shopping at a liquor store that's right next to a strip club. You know, it's a small business, yet they're catering to a particular crowd, um, and that's the people leaving there, because you can't take drinks from a bar or from a liquor store in there. I'm sure. Um, but I mean, even the liquor store is just trying to operate a business. They can't control their clientele, so it's not really the owner's fault. But now the strip club itself, there's complexities there that I'm not going to go into here, but so things are more complex than they appear, and supporting homeless people that are repeatedly homeless, but when you offer help, they reject it. Oh no, I'm not allowed to go to that mission anymore. Stuff like that. Then then you really have to evaluate things differently, so you don't become like this. No compassion, no empathy. Um, I could always tell my daughter, and she rolls her eyes. Things can be very complex, and you have to look at that complexity so that you can make an honest and righteous decision as to your judgment and how it relates and how it will relate to you. And so when you're in a situation like this, you don't want to become like the Pharisees and the scribes. And this is also a praise for this part of mid-Michigan giving us these opportunities. I'm not thanking anybody for the abuse or the suffering or the trauma or the injury. What I'm saying is the Holy Spirit has turned this into a lesson and a learning opportunity, and we can better discern spirits of who we're dealing with. And the thing that consistently I've seen is we need to get out of here. There are so many predators here and people with just nothing, no feeling for other people. They don't care about right and wrong, only how it pertains to them. And if they get caught, some people will just go to a new identity, or they'll hide it, or the whole time they were using their friend's badge, stuff like that. I've seen all. And or they're from an entirely different department, but people in the department were pretending that they worked there. I mean, we've seen so much stuff. And that's why people simulate everything. They don't want this stuff to get out, because they know that I will not hesitate to testify in front of a legislative or a judicial body. I won't hesitate. And I've tried before when Morley was being investigated, but somebody blocked my emails to the attorney. In Ohio, Morley was being investigated for a lot of shady stuff. Not Morley group of companies. We're not speaking of the main company. We're speaking of some of the employees on some contracts. But at least on our end, we were targeted. Somebody would intercept emails, intercept my messages to them. Everything was intercepted or blocked. So then the court case started, and I couldn't be involved. It had already proceeded to motions. So you just try your best to deal with these kind of people. And not all people at Morley are bad. Just to add that, there's a lot of good people there too. Just the problem is background checks. In this part of Michigan, I am disgusted with the amount of contractors that are hired, and they have a shady background, or you find out some connections within these particular agencies that are contractors, connections to extremist groups. It gives me a migraine to think about all the stuff that we've seen. It gives me a migraine. Nobody does background checks anymore. You got all kinds of people involved in all kinds of stuff. That's where the racism gets involved, because extremists are allowed to be contractors. And it's complex. You can't forget, let's see who else, some of the people that we've identified that have this kind of, no compassion, no empathy type attitude. Oh, let's see. We got the QAnoners. Some of the people that are involved in these groups, um, some of them are just lonely. They want to be part of something outside themselves. They want to find faith. They want to find, a adopted family, so to speak. They want to find meaning, and extremist groups will take advantage of that. And they will wear these people out until they're nothing sitting inside of a wheelchair. They will wear them out. We've seen it. And what else? Oh, then you got Me Tooers. A lot of Me Tooers around here. And one great way that people can target you is by make it look like you've been Me Too'd. Or they can make it look like you've been, times up, like somebody was inappropriate at work. Like I said before in other videos, they have websites where people post stuff totally unjustified. Let's see another one. Oh, they'll say that parents who are divorced, that one of the non-custodial parents is a deadbeat dad or a deadbeat mom. There's a great YouTube channel called Child Support Hustle, and she really looks at this stuff and breaks it down legally, and helps empower both custodial and non-custodial parents. Because essentially, if things go into court, it doesn't help anybody. If fathers or mothers are going to jail, all that does is ruin the kids' lives. This is state-sponsored terrorism against children and parents, but affects the children more long-term than the parents. Yeah, dads that have felonies now for felony child support can't get a good job. They have a criminal history. They're stigmatized. And then their kids, because of the operationalization of hate from the state, the kids will grow up hating their parent, the non-custodial parent who went to prison. And we all know of custodial parents that some of them, they just use the system. And all the while, until that family gets back together, the state's making 10 to 20% of every dollar. 10 to 20 cents out of every dollar. It varies. But 10 cents out of every dollar goes to the state. So somebody can get a retirement and the friend of the court system. Yeah, this is the state profiting off the destruction of families. So you see, with a lot of people now, there's a very strong movement that's growing in strength of parents that don't want to be involved with the friend of the court, not Secretary of State, the friend of the court. They don't want to be involved with them. They'll handle things on their own. And if people have wealth, then some people have done lump sum payments to the custodial parent, and then they sign off. They sign off on lifetime child support. Done. I have no problem with this person. And they're finding that stuff like this actually helps a more peaceful and more friendly environment for the children. We know we have a very sick government when the state or the county profits off the destruction of a family. Folks, we're not going to find one governor or one president that's going to fix everything. We need to do it. Person to person. That's how this change starts. That's how empathy, learning and practicing starts, is person to person. So, we've learned, the importance of empathy and the importance of sympathy, that scripturally they're mandatory, and that nobody has to be a bleeding heart, but they have to have an open heart. Especially Catholics and Orthodox out there, all the many icons and pictures of Jesus, the Sacred Heart icons, Immaculate Heart icons. You have to have an open heart, at least a little. And it's important that we try to help people regain these things, but yet we also have to hold to our own. Otherwise, these people that don't have any compassion or sympathy anymore, they don't have any empathy or sympathy, they will wear you down and put you in a wheelchair. And this is the praise part, that God would give us this lesson and open my eyes, so that I would see some of the very people that we're dealing with every day. People, if you have situations like ours, we're dealing with scribes and Pharisees and Sadducees again. Except now the system, the law is different. These are, laws of the state or manuals of the state, or so they claim. They may have their own updated version, which they may post different places or put it in their office. But still, we're dealing with people who are faceless in one way, but they have a face, concrete face. No empathy, no sympathy, no compassion, no understanding, or hesitance to do what's wrong, and they don't care to do what's right. So again, these are, what we deal with daily, and kind of helps reframe things for people that struggle with holiness. You struggle with righteousness. You struggle with your salvation. You work out your salvation with trembling and fear. Even when you mess up, you immediately stand up and say, "I'm sorry, Lord, forgive me. I will try again." Just to remember, just to challenge us, God allows Satan to surround us with scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees so we can get closer to Jesus.